This thing is so hot.
Yes, it is.
You want to lean on it, but you can't, right?
Oh, you can't lean on it.
Okay, so your video taking, right? Just in case I run out.
Speech on the occasion of the 26th anniversary of emancipation in the District of Columbia, Washington, D.C., April 16th, 1888. Friends and fellow citizens, it has been my privilege to assist in several anniversary celebrations of the abolition of slavery in the District of Columbia, but I remember no occasion of this kind when I felt a deeper solitude for the future welfare of our emancipated people than now. The chief cause of anxiety is not in the condition of colored people of the District of Columbia, though there is much that is wrong and unsatisfactory here, but the deplorable condition of the Negro in the southern states. At no time since the abolition of slavery has there been more cause for alarm on this account than at this juncture in our history. I have recently been in two of the southern states, South Carolina and Georgia, and my impression from what I saw, heard, and learned there is not favorable to my hopes for the race. I know this is a sad message to bring you on this 26th anniversary of freedom in the District of Columbia, but I know too that I have a duty to perform, and that duty is to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. And I should be unworthy to stand here, unworthy of the confidence of the colored people of this country, if I should, from any considerations of policy, withhold any fact or feature of the condition of the freedmen which the people of this country ought to know. The temptation on anniversary occasions like this is to prophesy smooth things, to be joyful and glad, to indulge in the illusions of hope, to bring glad tidings on our tongues and words of peace reveal. But while I know it is always easier to be the bearer of glad tidings than sad ones, while I know that hope is a powerful motive to exertion and high endeavor, while I know that people generally would rather look upon the bright side of their condition than to know the worst, there comes a time when it is best that the worst should be made known. And in my judgment, that time, in respect to the condition of the colored people of the South, is now. There are times when neither hope nor fear should be allowed to control our speech. Cry aloud, and spare not is the word of wisdom as well as of Scripture. Ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. Applies to the body not less than the soul, to this world not less than the world to come. Outside the truth there is no solid foundation for any of us, and I assume that you who have invited me to speak, and you who have come to hear me speak, expect me to speak truth as I understand truth. The truth at which we should get on this occasion respects the precise relation subsisting between the white and colored people of the South, or in other words, between the colored people and the old master class of the South. We have need to know this and to take it to heart. It is well said that a people may lose its liberty in a day and not miss it in half a century, and that the price of liberty is eternal vigilance. In my judgment, with my knowledge of what has already taken place in the South, these wise and wide-awake sentiments were never more apt and timely than now. I have assisted in fighting one battle for the abolition of slavery, and the American people have shed their blood in defense of the Union and the Constitution, and neither I nor they should wish to fight this battle over again. And in order that we may not, we should look at the facts in the face today, and if possible, nip the evil in the bud. I have no taste for the role of an alarmist. If my wishes could be allowed to dictate my speech, I would tell you something quite the reverse of what I now intend. I would tell you that everything is lovely with the Negro in the South. I would tell you that the rights of the Negro are respected and that he has no wrongs to redress. I would tell you that he is honestly paid for his labor, that he is secure in his liberty, that he is tried by a jury of his peers when accused of a crime, and that he is no longer subject to lynch law, that he has freedom of speech, that the gates of knowledge are open to him, that he goes to the ballot box unmolested, that his vote is duly counted and given its proper weight in determining result. I would tell you that he is making splendid progress in the acquisition of knowledge, wealth, and influence. I would tell you that his bitterest enemies have become his warmest friends, that the desire to make him a slave no longer exists anywhere in the South, that the Democratic Party is a better friend to him than the Republican Party, and that each party is competing with the other to see which can do the most to make his liberty a blessing to himself and to the country and to the world. But in telling you all this, I should be telling you what is absolutely false. And what you know to be false, and the only thing which would save such a story from being a lie, would be its utter inability to deceive. What is the condition of the Negro at the South at this moment? Let us look at both in the light of facts and in the light of reason. To understand it, we must consult nature as well as circumstances, the past as well as the present. No fact is more obvious than the fact that there is a perpetual tendency of power to encroach upon weakness and of the crafty to take advantage of the simple. This is a natural as for smoke to ascend or water to run down. The love of power is one of the strongest traits in the Anglo-Saxon race. This love of power, common to the white race, has been nursed and strengthened at the South by slavery. Accustomed during 200 years to the unlimited possession and exercise of irresponsible power, the love of it has become stronger by habit. To assume that this feeling of pride and power has died out and disappeared from the South is to assume a miracle. Any man who tells you that it has died out or has ceased to be exercised and made effective tells you that which is untrue, and in the nature of things could not be true. Not only is the love of power there, but a talent for its exercise has been fully developed. This talent makes the old master class of the South not only the masters of the Negro, but the masters of Congress, and if not checked, will make themselves the masters of this nation. It was something more than an empty boast in the old times, and it was said that one slave master was equal to 3 northern men. Though this did not turn out to be true on the battlefield, it does seem to be true in the councils of the nation. In sight of all the nations, these ambitious men of the South had dared to take possession of the government which they with broad blades and bloody hands sought to destroy. In sight of all the nation, they have disregarded and trampled upon the Constitution and organized parties on sectional lines. From the ramparts of the solid South with the 153 electoral votes in the Electoral College, they have dared to defy the nation to put a Republican in the presidential chair for the next 4 years, as they once threatened the nation with civil war if it elected Abraham Lincoln. With this grip on the presidential chair, with the House of Representatives in their hands, with the Supreme Court deciding every question in favor of the states as against the powers of the federal government, denying to the government the right to protect the elected franchise of its own citizens, they may not well feel themselves masters not only of the former slaves, but of the whole situation. With these facts before us, tell me not that the Negro is safe in the possession of his liberty. Tell me not that power will not assert itself. Tell me not that they who despise the Constitution they have sworn to support will respect the rights of the Negro, whom they already despise. Tell me not that men who thus break faith with God will be scrupulous in keeping faith with poor Negro laborers of the South. Tell me not that the people who have lived by the sweat of other men's faces and thought themselves Christian gentlemen while doing it will feel themselves bound by principles of justice to their former victims and their weakness. Such a pretense in face of the facts is shameful, shocking, and sickening. Yet there are men in the North who believe all of this. Well, may it be said that Americans have no memories. We look over the House of Representatives and see the solid South enthroned there. We listen with calmness to eulogies of the South and of the traitors and forget Andersonville. We look over the Senate and see the senator from South Carolina and we forget Hamburg. We see Robert Smalls cheated out of his seat in Congress and forget the planter and the service rendered by the colored troops in the late war for the Union. Well, the nation may forget. It may shut its eyes to the past and frown upon any who may do otherwise, but the colored people of this country are bound to keep fresh a memory of the past till justice shall be done from them in the present. When this shall be done, we shall, as readily as any other part of our respected citizens, plead for an act of oblivion. We are often confronted of late in the press and on the platform with the discouraging statement that the problem of the Negro as a free man and a citizen is not yet solved, that since his emancipation he has disappointed the best hopes of his friends and fulfilled the worst predictions of his enemies, and that he has shown himself unfit for position assigned him by the mistaken statesmanship of the nation. It is said that physically, morally, socially, and religiously, he is in a condition vastly more deplorable than was his condition as a slave, and that he has not proved himself so good a master to himself as his old master was to him, that he is gradually but surely sinking below the point of industry, good manners, and civilization to which he attained in a state of slavery, that his industry is fitful, that his economy is wasteful, that his honesty is deceitful, that his morals are impure, that his domestic life is beastly, that his religion is fetishism, and his worship is simply emotional, and that, in a word, he is falling into a state of barbarism. Such is the distressing description of the emancipated Negro as drawn by his enemies, and it is found reported in the journals of the South. Unhappily, however, it is a description not confined to the South. It has gone forth to the North. It has crossed the ocean. I met with it in Europe, and it has gone as far as the wings of the press and the power of speech can carry it. There is no measuring the injury inflicted upon the Negro by it. It cools our friends, heats our enemies, and turns away from us much of the sympathy and aid which we need and deserve to receive at the hands of our fellow men. But now comes the question: is this description of emancipated Negro true? In answer to this question, I must say yes and no. It is not true in all its lines and specifications and to the full extent of the ground it covers, but it certainly is true in many of its important features. And there is no race under heaven of which the same would not be equally true with the same antecedents and the same treatment which the Negro is receiving at the hands of this nation and the old master class to which the Negro is still a subject. I admit that the Negro, and especially the plantation Negro, the tiller of the soil, has made little progress from barbarism to civilization, and that he is in a deplorable condition since his emancipation, that he is worse off in many respects than when he was a slave. I am compelled to admit, but I contend that the fault is not his, but that of his heartless accusers. He is the victim of a cunningly devised swindle, one which paralyzes his energies, suppresses his ambitions, and blasts all his hopes. And though he is nominally free, he is actually a slave. I here and now denounce this so-called emancipation as a stupendous fraud. A fraud upon him, a fraud upon the world. It was not so meant by Abraham Lincoln. It was not so meant by the Republican Party. But whether so meant or not, it is practically a lie, keeping the word of the promise to the ear and breaking it to the heart. Do you ask me why the Negro of the plantation has made so little progress, why his cupboard is empty, why he flutters in rags, why his children run naked, and why his wife hides herself behind the hut when a stranger is passing? I will tell you, it is because he is systematically and universally cheated out of his hard earnings. The same class that once extorted his labor under the lash now gets his labor by a mean, sneaking, and fraudulent device. The device is a trucking system which never permits him to see or save a dollar of his hard earnings. The struggles like a man in a morass. The more he struggles, the deeper he sinks. The highest wage paid him is $8 a month, and this he receives only in orders on the store, which in many cases is owned by his employer. The scrip has purchasing power on that one store and that one only. A blind man can see the laborer is by this arrangement bound hand and foot, and it is completely in the power of his employer. He can charge the poor fellow what he pleases and give what kinds of goods he pleases, and he does both. His victim cannot go to another store and buy, and this the storekeeper knows. The only security the wretched Negro has under his arrangement is the conscience of the storekeeper, a conscience educated in the school of slavery, where the ideal prevailed in theory and practice that the Negro has no rights which white men were bound to respect, an arrangement in which everything in the way of food or clothing, whether tainted meat or damaged cloth, is deemed good enough for the Negro. For these he is often made to pay a double price. But this is not all, or the worst result of this system. It puts it out of the power of the Negro to save anything of what he earns. If a man gets an honest dollar for his day's work, he has a motive for laying it by and saving it for future emergency. It will be as good for us in the future, and perhaps better a year hence from now. But this miserable script has in no sense of the quality of a dollar. It is only good at one store and for a limited period. Thus the man who has it is tempted to get rid of it as soon as possible. It may be out of date before he knows it, or the storekeeper may move away and it may be left worthless on his hands. But this is not the only evil involved in this satanic arrangement. It promotes dishonesty. The Negro sees himself paid but limited wages, far too limited to support himself and family, and that in its worthless script, and he is tempted to fight the devil with fire. Finding himself systematically robbed, he goes to stealing, and as a result finds his liberty, such as it is, taken from him. And him himself put to work for a master in a chain gang, and he comes out, if he ever comes out, a ruined man. Every northern man who visits the old master class, the landowners and landlords of the South, is told by the old slaveholders with a great show of virtue that they are glad that they are rid of slavery and would not have the slave system back if they could, that they are better off than they ever were before, and much more of the same tenor. Thus northern men have come home duped and go on a mission of duping others by telling them the same pleasing story. There are very good reasons why these people would not have slavery back if they could, because far more creditable to their cunning than to their conscience, with slavery they had some care and responsibility for the physical well-being of their slaves. Now they have as firm a grip on the freedman's labor as when he was a slave, and without any burden of caring for his children or himself. The whole arrangement is stamped with fraud and is supported by hypocrisy, and I here and now on this Emancipation Day denounce it as a villainous swindle and invoke the press, the pulpit, and the lawmaker to assist in exposing it and blotting it out forever. Ladies and gentlemen, Thomas the Younger.